Welcome to the Qualitox podcast. I'm Ian Kugler, your host, and my guest today is Jerry Chapman. Jerry is a senior GMP quality expert at Redica Systems. Jerry is a veteran in pharma because he has been in the industry since 1978. He is also the author of many fascinating articles on the topic. Jerry has seen a lot, and today we're going to talk to him about things that never change in pharma, especially education, and why it must change, how, and who is already making the first steps for it. Before we get to the talk, I want to remind you that Qualistory is now also a social Q&A engine. So if you have a question about GMP or you want to help others, please go to www.qualistory.com and see for yourself how powerful this platform is. And now let's get to our talk with Jerry. Jerry, welcome to the Qualitox podcast. Thank you for coming and speaking to me. You are a true GMP expert. You're an author of dozens of articles, and it's really interesting talking to you because you're really knowledgeable in the area and you do a lot of research and write amazing stuff. So, uh, how long are you in the industry right now?
Well, thank you, Jan, for having me. I have been in the industry since 1978, which is an interesting year because that's the same year the FDA promulgated the GMPs. So they've been around a long time, so have I. I'm guessing a good majority of your audience probably wasn't even born yet
maybe
at that point.
maybe so that's a really amazing point to jump into the industry in the arena. So what do you love most about it?
As I said, I've been in the pharma industry for a long time, and what I have loved about the industry really hasn't changed, and that is that we help make people's lives better. We make medicines and therapies that help people help cure disease or help ease symptoms, and so we make people's lives better, and I think that's a very noble goal and one that I've been happy to be part of for a long time.
Where are we now in comparison to where when you have started?
As I reflect back, it's actually very amazing to me how little has changed. The science has changed. Obviously, science continues to advance. Technology is incredible. You know how what changes have occurred in the last many years. Uh, but the general feel of the industry and attitude, it just there are things that haven't changed at all or have changed very little. And that's a little concerning to me. And so one thing that hasn't changed is that we tend to react to uh, problems. We're very rarely proactive. We're always reactive. And if you look at FDA, for example, in the history of FDA, every time a major regulation has come along, it has been in response to a tragedy. It's been in response to a death or a bunch of deaths. It's been and that has happened over time. That happened, with the passage of the act in the 30s. It happened with thalidomide in the 60s. We tend to react when someone gets hurt or something bad happens. Then we react and then things change. But other than that, a lot of things just don't change. One thing that has just begun to change recently is the idea of quality as a value center. It's always been viewed as a cost center. Quality is the bad guys. They're the guys that are standing in the way of us releasing product to market. So, for example, when I started in quality, there was no training of any type. It was learned by osmosis. Basically, a person was tapped for a quality job because they understood manufacturing and because they had a good science background. And a lot of times when people are asked to go into quality, they refused and said, "No, that's a dead end. There's no future in quality. I'm going to go in manufacturing. That's where the money is, right?" There's been no real training in quality or no recognition of its importance until fairly recently. And there's a really interesting effort recently that I have written about from a group out of Cincinnati here in the US called Pathway for Patient Health. Marla Phillips from Xavier University there pulled together a group of individuals called the Chief Quality Officers. The highest level is from pharma, medical device, animal health, consumer products. And those folks got together and were looking at what do they need to do to help their industry sustain, over time. What were some of the real issues? And one of them that they identified was a lack of training in quality. And they put together a 5-course quality minor that is at the college level that accompanies a science major. And it was available first at Xavier University in Cincinnati, and then it's now in use at many universities. So someone can choose to go into quality rather than just somehow end up there. Actually, at my company, Redica Systems, we have a couple of interns from that program, and I've been very impressed with how much they learned in that program and will help them, hit the ground running and become the next quality management and quality leaders in the companies. So great effort, I think.
Yeah, I agree. So when you mean that there is not enough training, so it means that when you started, there were no regulations and requirements for training, or you mean that the training that we have right now at this moment is still not enough?
As far as quality goes and what is quality, you can train someone on the regulations, but there are so many instances where quality needs to partner with the business and make decisions on, is this product of the appropriate quality to release to the market, or is it not? How do you decide that? What kinds of parameters do you use to make those decisions? And how companies have decided, to make those decisions has not been consistent across the industry. A lot of homegrown efforts, although there have been some good efforts. And just recently, I was talking with a colleague of mine regarding at AstraZeneca regarding a program they've put in place called the Modern Quality Professional. And that's a recognition. So it's complementary to having university training to bring someone into the organization that has a good, solid background and foundation. They've put together some coursework, and it's not just coursework. It's interesting in that it's not just classroom learning, but there's also mentoring aspects. There are shadowing aspects. There are experiential aspects to how the whole system goes together, and they base the training for the individual on what their role is going to be. So, for example, does a person need to be informed, or are they going to be reviewing documents, or are they going to be approving documents? So that's a big difference. So, for example, something like change control, to be able to approve a change control document, someone has to have a lot of understanding of the manufacturing process, right? And they need to know, what should I look at? How do I look at the results of this change and whether something has changed in my product, whether we may need to change our product registration. Is it still within the right specs, and so on and so forth.
You mentioned right now, most of the people who come to pharma, to the quality, they come from some life sciences background. They get in and then they learn from their local managers, mentors, and so on. They learn from the environment, from the culture, from one company, but nobody says this is the best way, right? Because there is no all round program, or there wasn't until now, where people sat together and from different companies, from different experiences, and said, okay, this is the best way. Let's teach that to everybody so when they come, they know the best way. What topics, for example, from this program, or in your opinion, should be taught to people who want to go to quality, which can be learned in the university, so that could really help them?
So the Pathway for Patient Health effort that I was talking about to put together the quality minor, it consists of 5 courses. And so those courses, one of them is global regulatory and legal requirements of quality. So it's a really deep dive into national and international regulations, and they've set this up as the first course, and basically have told students this is going to tell you whether you have an interest in this as a minor or not. Right? You're going to go through and get into a lot of the detail on the regulations um, and guidance documents from around the world, and how do they relate to each other? Why are they important? How are they used? In a manufacturing environment. Um, and so that's sort of the overview course. They have one on product development, product specifications, and process validation. Okay. So learning about developing product and what goes into product development, and what do you have to keep in mind in product development for scale up later to move into manufacturing, right? How do we set specifications, and what is process validation, and why is process validation important? They also have a course on risk and failure analysis. There's a chunk of that course that actually I teach that deals with manufacturing deviations and how to investigate and document manufacturing deviations and find root cause. Then the other 2 courses that round out the quality minor are microbiology laboratory, a microbiology course with a laboratory, so that the individuals, anybody going into pharma needs to understand microbiology to some extent. If they're making sterile products, very much so, or biologics, but even with oral solid doses, there's bioburden to consider, right? So that's another course, and then the 5th course is one on business acumen, and that's just an overview of business and what makes businesses run, and what are the cost centers, and you know how do you make profit, and how does quality fit into all of that, because quality is part of the business, right? I mean, if we didn't have a business, we wouldn't need quality. So
As someone who mostly work in big companies, and when you come to quality, you concentrate on your small part of the job. And you
mhm.
mentioned that at the beginning you learn about how the regulations from different countries come together. You learn how it all comes together from the business side and from the manufacturing. And usually when you go to pharma, you don't really, especially in big pharma, you don't learn all the parts of it. And this a lot of those things I just studied for myself because I was interested, so I went and researched. But this is not something that you get. So I think this is something that even people who are in their mid career or the begin the career could even benefit from something like this, because sounds really interesting too, because also the business studies, because sometimes the quality, they don't always understand the business behind it, and how to take the considerations and the impact on the longevity of the company, because you need to make the balance between the quality and the income, right? And the safety and the quality and the consequences. We know that there are courses for everything, like in the university when you go and study it. Why is it coming so late to the pharma to the quality? Because quality is considerably new, right? So we have it from the 60s, 70s. Most of the lawyers, economics, you have it probably for much longer. So is it the reason? So it took us that long to understand. Okay, we need quality as a subject.
I think that's correct. Yeah, I think it's just taken the realization that this is important. And I think it's like so many things in our industry that we were talking about not long ago with where we react. We have problems and we react. And so industry has found out through a lot of uh, issues that quality can impact their bottom line. And FDA comes in and they do an investigation. If you get a major 483, that's a lot of work and a lot of money. If it becomes a warning letter, it's even more. And so I think that over time, that realization that we could be a little more proactive in those areas and could do that by training the people coming in or having them train is probably part of it. I would also mention, just to comment, I think you made an interesting point that a lot of this kind of information and training would be of interest to not just college students, but people already in the industry, early or mid-career. And so this Pathway for Patient Health organization that sponsors this minor, you can contact them and you can get these courses can be made available to companies. So what they have without going into a lot of detail, they have a sponsorship program. And becoming a sponsor allows you access to their students for internships or for interviewing and hiring, and it also allows you access to the coursework that you can use internally in your company.
It's amazing that we are developing into this direction, because we know that there are people who are in management that are going to do a master's degree in business. So it's normal that people in the middle of their career go and do another degree to advance further, to broaden their perspective. So I think everybody in quality can benefit from another perspective. And you also mentioned something about the training for leadership in pharma, and we know that as we said, most of the people who come to pharma to quality are coming from life sciences, and not many of them have business degrees or some experience with leadership. So how those programs help develop leaders in pharma. So first of all, where do you think we stand in terms of leaders in pharma? Do you think we are in a good position? Are most of the managers are good leaders, and where can we get from there?
I guess I would have a couple of comments in that regard. One is I have seen through my career a method that is used in a lot of companies of training leadership that in my experience, has not been positive. It's been detrimental, and that is the idea of rotating people through different job responsibilities for maybe 2 years. You go into a job, you're there for 2 years, you rotate through quality, say, okay, well, this person's going to be in senior management. They need to have some understanding of quality. So you go into this quality job and you're there for 2 years to understand what's going on with quality. And just about the time you begin to develop a good understanding, you're moved out to another job. And so the people in those roles end up being in an almost constant training mode. And the people who rotate through those jobs and then rotate out aren't really adding a lot of value or staying long enough to learn enough to add to the company. But there are some companies, and I mentioned AstraZeneca is doing I think some really good work, and so they have technical training, they have business training, they have shadowing. They base their training on what a person's role is going to be. If you're going to be in a role of releasing batches to the public or making that decision on whether this particular deviation has been resolved to the point where it's okay for us to release this, and we're not going to, we're going to be releasing good product. It's not suspect product. That requires a lot of experience, a lot of training, versus someone who is in an advisor role or a reviewer role would not need to know quite as much. So So, I mean, I think, and it's not just AstraZeneca. I know I've talked with folks at some other companies. There's been more of a realization over the past 10 or 20 years that we need to have good, strong leaders in our quality organizations, and companies are putting those programs together, hopefully without the element of the job rotation that, again, as I've seen, has not been a good thing.
You mentioned that you think that generalization is not the key here. It means that if people rotate, they are generalists. They know a bit of this, a bit of that, but they are not masters of anything, right? So you think this is
Right.
a bad direction.
Yes. Over time, there has been so many kinds of observations from regulatory agencies that don't change year after year after year. Many of them are the same observations. And part of that, I think, is because we don't have people staying around long enough to have the history and understand. They're rotating through, and so you have a group that figures out this is important, this is how we do this, and then they move on, and 5 years later, FDA comes in and they find the same thing again, right? And so the idea of having people who are trained fairly deeply in an area and are rewarded for that as as a career, I think is a good thing. And part of that is the skill set of being able to investigate and document manufacturing deviations and the CAPAs that follow up from those deviations. That's not trivial. It can be very difficult, and to do that right, and it takes a team effort, and it takes some real commitment on the part of a company to make sure that they have a group of people who can do that and don't just rotate through that job, but learn those skill sets and apply them, to the benefit of themselves and the company.
Jerry, thank you very much for your time and for speaking with me about those interesting topics.
Thank you for having me. I would enjoy speaking with you again.
Thanks for listening to the Qualitalks podcast. If you enjoyed the show, please leave us a 5-star review. If you want to learn more about GMP, please visit us at www.qualistery.com. Stay compliant and see you at the next one.